Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
Thank you, Herbert. I'm going to focus my remarks on a slightly different aspect of risk than we're used to speaking of. So all of us so far have mostly spoken about the financial risk elements and the challenges for private capital mobilization. But there's another set that is equally important, and these are the non-financial risks. So for us as a pension fund, if we want to invest in emerging markets, Africa or wherever, assuming we get all the technical stuff right, we get the de-risking capital, we figure out how we're gonna manage our FX risk. There's a pipeline, we have the data. We'll still need to go to the investment committees, the representatives of the depositors, and win their approval. And they're gonna ask us about things that have nothing to do with the financial elements, because they're gonna assume that those are taken care of, or we would never even be there in the first place. They're gonna ask us, well, how are you protecting against reputational risk and political risk? And these other non-financial risk elements. And it can kind of be summed up as a simple question. If something goes wrong, who are you gonna call? You don't know these markets. These aren't your home markets. You've never been there before. How are you gonna fix a problem if one emerges? Because no matter where you invest, whether it's in Montreal, in Manhattan, or Mozambique, things go wrong, right? If things didn't go wrong, there'd be no risk and there'd be no return. And so they're often interested in knowing, what's your plan for solving these problems? And it's a challenge, to be honest, because for most of us pension funds, we don't have long-standing institutional relationships with either the governments or the private sector in a lot of these countries. And so that right there is the issue. So how do we go about trying to solve that? So let me draw on SDG 17 and the word partnerships, because I think that's the way to go. And I'll look at 3 or 4 kinds of partnerships. One is with the governments themselves. So I really think, and you were asking in the note, recommendations for heads of state. I think one is, it'll be very important for the governments of emerging economies to do more, and conversely for the institutional investors to do more to try and build direct relations with each other so that they become familiar with each other, learn each other's language, vocabulary, priorities, and build that trust that is needed over time to feel confident to deploy capital at scale. So that's one. Other kinds of partnerships. I know we're not really supposed to talk about the MDBs, but I will a little bit. The multilateral development banks have presence in every one of these countries, and they often have very well-connected resident coordinators who have good government relations. But it's not just the MDBs, the UN too, for that matter, right? The UN have resident coordinators. So getting them involved, they might not always be able to provide financing, and the UN essentially never, but they can help provide, political risk mitigation. If I can tell my depositors or my investment committee, yes, the UN has skin in the game. If something goes wrong, I do have a 911 I can call. I can call the UN resident coordinator in country XYZ, and he or she's on the case and will do the best they can to resolve this issue. That will go a long way. And then there's partnerships amongst us, the investors themselves. So again, if I'm presenting, it will help if I can say, hey, we're investing with Citibank. We're investing with these big institutions. That will give, the representatives of, Quebec firefighters confidence that, we're not messing around. We're going in with serious players who know what they're doing. So that kind of partnership, and find, partnerships with the donor governments. It will also help if I'm able to say, oh, we're not just investing by ourselves. We're investing with, Uncle Sam, the US government. We're investing with Japan, with the UK. All of that will help overcome what's essentially almost psychological barriers to wanting to deploy money to markets that people are unfamiliar with. And I think that's an important element of these conversations. Thank you.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.